Hello and welcome to This Really Happened, a place where unbelievable, heart-touching true stories come to life. Sometimes surprising, sometimes bittersweet, always real. Grab a drink and settle in. We're about to begin. Two Marys exchanged tired, understanding glances, Daniel's teacher and the school director, Beatrice Davies. It was as if they had silently agreed. We'll just have to tolerate this clumsy mother a little longer. What can you expect from someone like that? She froze with confusion, unable to compose herself. Such a long journey. Isn't there a boarding school closer? I won't even manage to visit him every day after work. I simply won't catch the return bus. Beatrice Davies, the director, softened her words, as if speaking to a small child. A boarding school does not imply daily visits from parents to their children. You will come for Daniel on Saturdays and take him home for the weekends, and for holidays too. I will arrange the application for a study allowance for you. You are a single mother with a modest income. You are entitled to benefits. This decision is the best one, primarily for Daniel. However much she told herself, don't give in to weakness, her eyes filled with bitter moisture on their own. Soon, unbidden tears rolled down her cheeks. Her mascara must have run, and her appearance became utterly forlorn. Eleanor Lewis, Daniel's teacher, kindly offered her a paper napkin from the school cafeteria and sat down on a nearby chair. Nellie, please allow me to address you informally. May I, Beatrice Davies? Thank you. This way, perhaps the conversation will flow better. For Daniel, this is a true salvation. Don't think that a boarding school is only a refuge for wayward children. That's nonsense. It's simply that people's life circumstances sometimes unfold in such a way that the choice falls on a boarding school for their children's education. And there is no shame in that whatsoever. This boarding school is renowned as a glorious abode. This is not just talk for reports. A close friend of my cousin works there as a cook. The staff's inner workings are known. The spirit there is good. No horrors are committed. Fights are unheard of. The teaching staff is united. And most importantly, the English there is wonderful. The teacher is strong and knows how to ignite interest. For Daniel, such mentors are paramount. He is a capable, extraordinary boy. I've been here for a quarter of a century, Helen. I have the right to judge this and compare. He won't get such an education in our local school. Forgive my words, Beatrice Davies. There's simply nowhere to find subject experts of that level here. The director lowered her head, exhaling dryly. Who of that standard would be drawn to us? See? Eleanor Lewis pointed towards the director. Helen, this is the truth of life. Think about Daniel's interests. When he grows up, he will thank you for taking the chance so he could have a different fate. Nowadays, language is needed everywhere, and with language come completely different salaries. Well, I see you found peace, and you share my thoughts. I just got carried away by emotion. Helen wiped her hot cheeks with the napkin, crumpled hastily, and thrown into the bin under the table. I can't even think yet how I'll talk to Daniel about this. What if he thinks I want to get rid of him? He'll grow up and say, she gave me away to make her own life easier. And we've already thought about that, haven't we, Beatrice Davies? Eleanor Lewis smiled, pleased with herself. I've already spoken to Daniel twice. There's no need to worry, Helen. He's even quite keen to go study in the city, provided he can come home on weekends. Novelty appeals to him. At his age, it's an adventure. Especially since, although he's quiet and diligent, he's not timid and strives for a lot in life. You're raising such a son, Helen. You'll be proud yet. It seemed they had spoken only yesterday. And 6 months later, her son was graduating. At the parent-teacher meeting before the new year, they would reveal all the details. For 1.5 years, she had been setting aside a little money from each paycheck for this event for her son, to give him a pleasant surprise. And if it wasn't enough, her friend Nancy promised to lend her some. It would be good to find out in advance how much money was needed, to figure out how much would be left for Daniel's outfit and shoes. And she probably needed to give something herself, at least to the class teacher. "What do you think, flowers, sweets, maybe some brandy?" Helen asked her friend, who was more experienced in such matters. "Brandy? Oh, my dear Sorrow," Nancy laughed, tilting her head back. "You're not going to see a doctor after being discharged. And don't worry at all, it's all standard. You hand over the money, and the parent committee will order everything themselves. You don't need to bring anything extra. Better buy something for yourself to wear to the graduation. How many years has it been since you bought anything for yourself? You look at you, and you'd think they haven't paid salaries at your post office in years. Everything for your son, everything for little Daniel. That's good, of course, but in moderation too. You can't completely forget about yourself. I'm almost 10 years older, Nellie, and I still think of myself as young and spoil myself sometimes. You're only 35, you're still a girl, and you've written yourself off as an old aunt." It seemed Nancy didn't need food all day if you gave her the chance to lecture someone about life. Usually, Helen was conveniently available for this. But Nancy didn't just give unsolicited advice. She would also never refuse help if needed. As for spending money on herself, it was easy for Nancy to talk. Her husband had a modest but steady job at the tractor station, and their grown daughter and son-in-law lived in the big city, didn't ask for help, sometimes even helped their parents with money. It was useless to remind Nancy that when her Sarah went to the city to study at vocational school, she also had to spend money. She didn't want her daughter to look poor. She didn't want to. Since the 4th grade, almost 8 years ago, he had been studying at the city boarding school. Good Eleanor Lewis, who still taught the little ones in the primary classes at their village school, had been right. In Daniel's class, there were only 2 children from underprivileged families, and one of them was Daniel. The others studied at the boarding school for different reasons. Some were not wanted by their mother's new husband, even if he wasn't poor at all. Some single or divorced mothers juggled 2 jobs, or their own small business, and were simply afraid their child would grow up completely unsupervised. And who knows how many fates there are? Everyone has their own lot. It's easiest to judge without understanding. Some buy their children off with expensive gifts. They don't take them home every weekend, but they give them an expensive mobile phone or a game console, Daniel told her. Helen didn't ask if he liked such a substitute. She was embarrassed by awkward questions. If her son was happy to visit home, then it was fine. She tried her best, so he wouldn't feel deprived. It wasn't his fault that she had been an orphan since the cradle and was raising him alone. And Helen tried. She bought ordinary toys at first, then the game console her son mentioned, a player, a mobile phone, shoes, and clothes. She knew she was buying cheap things, but with her salary as a postal operator, she still had to manage to buy something beyond the bare necessities. Nothing was left for herself, and Helen tried not to notice. What was the point of thinking about it and looking unhappy? A tearful, miserable face wouldn't bring in any more money anyway. She read aloud an article from a fashion magazine. "Negative emotions are detrimental to health." "Exactly. I've always felt this," Nancy triumphed. "My mother even told me, spit on everything, take care of your health." And now British scientists have confirmed it. These British scientists are everywhere. Sometimes they study such nonsense that everyone has known for ages without them, and they probably get huge sums for it. They rewrite an old truth in a new way and go to the Canaries with their fees. There, I even rhymed. But we won't be envious. We don't care about their earnings. Let's forget about negative emotions and be healthy. Helen completely agreed that whining wouldn't improve her health, so she nicknamed her boots, which she had worn for 10 years, the anniversaries, and tried to look at them without sadness. Not long ago, Helen used to come to the regional city before weekends and holidays and bring Daniel home from the boarding school. She loved those evenings very much when she and her son sat side by side on the bus. She would put her arm around his shoulders, they would chat about everything and anything, and somewhere halfway, Daniel would fall silent and fall asleep. Helen would listen to his quiet breathing. But for 3 years now, Daniel had been coming home by himself. 8th grade, Mother. I can take the regular bus and get to Camishin myself. And 1 ticket is cheaper than 2. You're always talking about saving money. Oh, you sly one. You found an excuse. You grabbed onto saving money. You've become completely grown up. Helen laughed, ruffling his hair. Just say you're embarrassed to travel with your mother, like a little kid. Of course, the boy had grown up. He wanted to feel like an adult. It made her a little sad. This time had come when he almost didn't need her anymore, and soon he wouldn't need her at all. You should be happy, Nancy exclaimed in response to her sad confession. You've almost raised your son. Soon he'll be earning his own money, and things will be much easier for you. You'll be able to breathe, rest, and finally allow yourself something. Helen understood that her friend was right, but for some reason she couldn't feel happy. The parent-teacher meeting at the boarding school was held a week before the New Year holidays. Daniel stayed to finish his studies, and Helen took the last evening bus home to the village alone. She was a little bewildered. The graduation would cost more than she had thought. In their village, they collected much less money for school celebrations because most parents struggled to make ends meet. Only if someone's husband earned money working away from home on rotation, then they had funds, or someone who kept livestock and sold meat. She had brought the sum saved over a 1.5 years for a rainy day from her salary. Now, no matter how she calculated, it would only be enough for Daniel's outfit and shoes. And she had nothing to wear to go see her son. Okay, maybe she would figure something out in 6 months. She could borrow a dress from someone, but shoes were more difficult. And anyway, all this was such nonsense. The main thing was that her Daniel had won the District English Olympiad. He was good with exact sciences, only occasionally getting C's in chemistry and biology. He had no interest in those subjects, but other teachers praised him highly. She wondered who he took after. Helen herself had been an average student, and Michael, Daniel's father, hadn't shown much interest in studying. There was no one with a solid education in either of their families. Daniel would be the first, though it was better not to think about it so as not to jinx it. Helen and her friend Nancy had a good plan. When Daniel got into university, he could live in the city with Nancy's cousin. The aunt was willing to rent out a room for almost nothing, provided the lodger helped her around the house, carrying groceries from the shop and walking her dog in bad weather. Her own son lived in Moscow, and she herself was often ill and complained that it was hard for her without help. If only the aunt wouldn't change her mind and ask for a high price. "Girl, wake up now, your beloved Camishin," the conductress touched her shoulder. "Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Am I holding up the bus? Thank you. Goodbye." Helen grabbed her bag and rushed out of the bus, not even fully awake. "Good girl," the conductress said after her, liking to discuss the passengers who flashed by depending on her mood when there weren't many people on the bus. Her son is studying in the city, in a boarding school. She's so proud of him. He's a smart boy. She thinks only of him. She's raising her son alone. Did you see what a worn-out jacket she wears? And her boots will fall apart soon. She's neat, takes care of herself, but poverty can't be hidden. And she's pretty too, if you dressed her up. Your whole bus depot would break their necks looking back. That's what I'm telling you. Ah. A week later, as the small team at the village post office was preparing a modest table after work on the last day before the new year, Nancy rushed in. You could always tell if something was wrong with her. She became serious and collected. Now even her round cheeks seemed slightly sunken. Her eyes were wide open, and bewilderment lurked in them. Helen, hi, put this jar of pickled tomatoes down. I just happened to find out. From Tony, he used to work as a driver at the roadside cafe on the highway. She's the cashier, she's the bartender, she's also the waitress. The cafe was popular with truckers and loggers. He passed away. Michael. For some reason, he got drunk and went from the sauna into an ice hole in bitter frost, and his heart couldn't take it. I didn't ask for details, and Tony probably doesn't know. I had no idea that his friend Tony had kept in touch with Michael all these years, calling and writing. I only just found out by chance. I asked why Moose looked so gloomy, and he said, yesterday they commemorated his friend Tony. That's the story. No, one good drink and the person is gone. He was so young. Who could have thought his heart was weak? Helen, for some reason, picked up the 3-litre jar of tomatoes again and quietly called out to her boss. Irene, I can't stay for the office party. Truly, I can't. Please excuse me to the girls. What's wrong, Nellie? I found out that Daniel's father passed away, Nancy answered for her friend. Oh, Irene exhaled. She wanted to add something else, but just waved her hand and suddenly suggested, Stay, both of you girls. We can commemorate him together. Why would you sit alone, reminiscing, dwelling on the past? And we're all friends here. If you need to talk, we'll always listen. You really should stay, Helen. Nancy supported the idea. I can't. My husband is waiting for me home early, worried he won't make good aspic without me. And we have guests for New Year's. I wouldn't care about this aspic when such things happen, but then he'll grumble for 2 weeks that I'm chatting with my friends, and the household is neglected. So thank you, Irene. Keep an eye on things. And Daniel is coming tomorrow, and my mood will immediately lift. This is life. What can you do? It keeps rolling on. In the morning, Helen regretted going to Nancy's after the gathering at her beloved post office instead of going home. She wasn't used to alcohol. She drank very rarely. A glass of sparkling wine on New Year's or a shot of sweet liqueur at someone's birthday, and she had no idea of her limits. And there they were all evening, reminiscing with Nancy about the past, their youth, Helen's love story with Michael. And Nancy's husband, Alex, hearing the reason, brought out a bottle of cherry liqueur. He made the liqueurs himself, and they were treacherous, tasty, easy to drink like juice, only if you had too much, your legs would get tangled even with a clear head. Alex commemorated Michael with the friends with 1 shot and quietly withdrew, not bothering them further, and they stayed up past midnight. Only then did she understand. All these years she had kept the promise she made to herself, not to talk or even think about Michael. But today she could, she even should, especially since she trusted Nancy and wasn't at all embarrassed by her memories around her. Michael appeared in their class in the very last school year. He arrived with his father, who had decided to return to the village after many years of working all over the country. Michael's father, George, was a drilling master. He had travelled everywhere with various expeditions, with geologists and surveyors. The village women discussed the strange story for almost a month. Michael's mother had left for another man, simply ran away, leaving her son with his father. When fathers abandon their children, no one is surprised by this, but it's incomprehensible when a mother can do such a thing. That was the unanimous verdict of the local gossips. What kind of love did she find? Her husband was almost non-drinking, calm, handy. He even saved up money, not a lot, but enough to renovate his father's old house and buy new furniture. And he has a car, even if it's old. In short, a perfectly good prospect. He won't be alone for long, especially since his son is almost a grown boy, soon off to the army. He'll stay here, in the village. There's nothing for young people to catch here now. As soon as Helen saw Michael, she immediately knew there would be something special between them. She had never dated anyone, hadn't even thought about boys. She was just a child. But then she understood, and that was it. Most teenage boys were awkward, gangly, but he was a fine young man. He walked into the classroom behind the headmistress and looked up. His very first glance fell on Helen, and they gazed at each other for several moments without looking away. Helen knew he liked her. She didn't even need to say anything. Helen's mother, Lucy, had studied in the district centre and married a newcomer from the North Caucasus there. In the first years, when the young couple rented a place, they lived well, and their daughter Helen was born. And then they went to her husband's homeland, where his behaviour among his own people changed almost beyond recognition. Her mother recounted, "He was terribly jealous and started acting like some sort of villain, like, 'Be quiet, woman, I'm in charge.' And their mother-in-law, a woman, was supposed to honour and endure her nagging until she became a mother-in-law herself. Here, at least relatives would stand up for you in case something happened. But I was a stranger. I had no one. I endured a little. It was scary to get a divorce with a small child, but I finally decided and came home with you. If it had been a son, maybe my husband wouldn't have given him up. He would have fought for custody, but he let you go easily." After returning home, her mother Lucy got a job at the post office. Helen remembered this post office for as long as she remembered herself, constantly hanging around her mother's workplace after school. She truly knew how everything worked there, like her own home. After her mother's death, Helen was given her mother's job, and everyone considered it a matter of course. Who else would they hire? Indeed, the post office, that was Helen's lot. But back then she was sure her lot was Michael. Her mother had instilled in Helen that a girl should seem a little indifferent, sometimes be capricious, not be the first to make up after a quarrel. Let the boy think that he wasn't as important to her as she was to him. Let him win her over. And all of this was in vain. Her mother's words blew away like dust past her daughter's ears. Helen was completely unable and unwilling to hide how much she loved Michael. He liked it, and he got used to it. They didn't even quarrel once. Helen easily gave in. Everything seemed trivial compared to the happiness of being near him. The first school year flew by like a whirlwind, and Michael left for the district centre to study to be a car mechanic. And Helen went to see him every weekend, when he couldn't or didn't want to come to the village himself. Most often he didn't want to. "Michael's father misses him very much. You should visit him. You haven't been home for 2 months. He started plying me with drinks after each of my trips to see you. I even promised him I would come myself and tell him your news. Last time he asked if you were upset about something. I think he was hinting that you were jealous of his Aunt Brenda. Tell him I'm an adult. I have my own things to do here. Let him live with his Brenda. I'm completely fine with it. He shouldn't live alone. I'm not planning to live in the village after studying in the army." Helen thought this was self-evident. When he talked about himself, he was talking about her too. They were always together, and it would always be that way. She was never alarmed. Was there a place for her in Michael's future plans? She felt a little sorry for Michael's father, Uncle George. Even though he had found a companion, a son was still a son. Before the army, Michael did come to Camishin to see his father. That's where they saw him off. He had already worked in a car service. He handled money confidently and independently. He brought Helen a tight blue denim miniskirt and a white t-shirt with palm trees and a beach. She wore the gifts to Michael's send-off to the army. Camishin wasn't a small village, and half of Camishin came to see Michael off. Brenda, George's partner, along with her friends, set the tables in the garden. She worked as a cook and came up with many interesting dishes from the simplest products, so there would be enough for everyone. Michael's friend Tony came from the district centre. He worked at the same car service. He was already an adult, about 25. And Helen danced 2 slow dances with him. Michael got seriously sulky with her. But by evening he was tired of pretending to be jealous, and they slipped away from everyone together to the river, where a company of local fishermen had built a small riverside hut. It turned out surprisingly cosy. They would stumble in the evening with shashlik and other delicacies, and at dawn they would go fishing. That evening there was no one there, and the hut sheltered Michael and Helen until dawn. She thought it was a good omen. It meant they would soon have their own home. They just needed to wait a little longer. She didn't tell Michael about it. She felt shy for some reason. And then the waiting began, the first month of which felt endless. And a little later, Helen found out they were going to have a child, and she immediately told Michael. When the reply to her letter came, Helen clearly understood that the child would only be hers. Michael explained to her that he hadn't planned any children until he had his own home and money, and she had carelessly put him on the spot, like a small child. If Helen wanted them to stay together, she needed to solve the problem. Nothing terrible, there's still enough time to fix everything. Right when you've decided everything. Kisses, bye. Helen stopped writing. She hadn't decided anything, although Michael had been so clear. He didn't get in touch. 2 months later, her mother died from a rapid, severe illness. Grief overshadowed other problems for a while. Her mother hid what was happening to her until the end. She considered it unnecessary to frighten her daughter in advance, since the doctor's prognoses were unequivocally bleak. The funeral and memorial service passed. Neighbours and friends helped. Helen lived as if in a fog and didn't even realise that her condition was already noticeable. Uncle George came, cleared his throat and asked, "Helen, is it okay if I ask directly? Does Michael know?" "He knows. He knows. He doesn't want it. He asked me to solve the problem," Helen said dryly. "I'll write to that stray puppy," Uncle George promised. "Don't even think otherwise. I have no doubt he's the father. There can't be any other way." But Michael replied the same thing to his father as he had to her. He hadn't planned anything like this, that he shouldn't be taken into account at all, that he could be presented with a fait accompli. He wasn't going to get married, not until he was 30. He wanted to see the world. Especially since life had changed now, there were different opportunities, and he already knew where he would go to work after the army. He had arranged it. So they shouldn't wait for him in Camishin. Helen felt sorry for Michael's father when he came to show her the letter. He couldn't even say a word himself, and didn't dare to step further than the threshold into the house. "Uncle George, let's not panic prematurely. Maybe he'll still change his mind. This is just from the shock." Helen began to comfort both herself and her potential father-in-law. "I'll help when the child is born. Don't be shy, just ask," Uncle George assured her, and quickly left the door. Helen truly hoped it was easier for her that way. And when her son was born, she named him after Michael's. Michael still didn't get in touch. Grandpa George did help in the first years. He bought a stroller, a crib, a little snowsuit for his grandson. Helen received a single mother's allowance. She couldn't bring herself to force herself to demand that Michael acknowledge paternity and pay alimony, as if it were something dirty. Then Uncle George found a new job and moved beyond the Urals with Brenda. He stayed there. He liked it. Sometimes he sent small sums for Daniel's birthday and New Year's. Then Helen would give them to Daniel in parts as pocket money. But in the last couple of years, much less money came from his grandfather. George had retired and no longer went on expeditions. "Does George know that his son is gone?" "He's already been told without you, Nellie," Nancy told her friend. "Don't pick at that wound. It's not your place to comfort George. You've grown distant. Fate has taken you far apart. Forgive my frankness, of course, but there, your Michael has seen the world. And why do people think that if you live only for yourself and your own convenience, happiness will immediately fall upon you? Nothing did. He's gone." Indeed, her friend was right. Her tongue felt heavy, barely moving in her mouth. It was time to go home. Daniel was coming for the holidays tomorrow. She wanted to make something tasty for him in the evening, but now she would have to do it early in the morning. She woke up when Daniel was already home, and the sun was shining brightly through the windows. She sprang out of bed, threw a robe straight over her old pajamas. She felt ashamed in front of her son. She had never greeted him like this before. She needed to explain everything to him. He would understand. He was grown up. "Mother, I already know everything. Calm down," Daniel interrupted her rambling story. "You don't need to worry about me. I don't feel anything about this at all. For me, this person was as if he never existed, and you don't need to start drinking over this." "I just yesterday, son, this one time, it doesn't mean I—" "Well, nothing. Nothing hurts anymore. This person was once very important to me. So we commemorated him with Nancy. But let's talk about something good instead. You said someone would bring you an outfit and shoes for graduation?" "Yes, Tim's mother brings goods from Poland. She promised to find something for the amount specified. I warned her not to go over. I don't want you to get into debt, and I haven't earned anything myself yet." Helen cracked a couple of eggs into a bowl for the pie with a flourish and sighed. "Good boy. That's right. We don't need debts. We have nothing to pay them back with. I myself can't figure out what I'll wear to your graduation yet." "Mother, can I ask you for one thing?" Daniel asked suddenly, abruptly. "Of course," Helen replied readily. "Just don't scare me. You're being too serious." "No, nothing's wrong. It's just, you don't need to come to the graduation, okay? It's easier for you. You don't need to rack your brain over unnecessary problems." "What? Why?" Helen was taken aback. "It's such an event. It only happens once, like a wedding. I'll look at you and be proud of how much you've grown. Then you'll leave to study, to work, and I'll remember you as you were on that day." "Mother, you'll see me 1,000,000 more times without this. There's nothing new or interesting there. It's all boring nonsense. The only interesting thing is the disco on the boat, but that's only for graduates without parents." "You don't understand me, Daniel," Helen laughed, not knowing how else to react. "My life is pretty much the same every day, so some ceremonial nonsense is fine." There was silence for a couple of minutes. Daniel hesitated, choosing his words, and finally said in the same abrupt, tense voice, "Please don't be offended, but there are other holidays, here, with us, where everyone knows you and no one will judge you by your appearance. You're used to your life and you don't notice how poor we are, that other people see it. I never told you, but after the meetings, they really discuss the parents, who came in what, who arrived in what, how it infuriates me. You studied here, in the village, where you were all the same, you just don't understand. No matter how good I am myself, I will never gain authority while some people call me the son of a tramp. I've even gotten into fights because of it. Remember how the class teacher complained about my behavior? She was genuinely surprised. Such a student, such grades, and suddenly such behavior. Daniel artfully mimicked the class teacher. I'm not going to explain it to her. Do you think Helen replied calmly. Are you ashamed of me? Do you regret that you were unlucky and got such a poor mother? As if you're worse than all other mothers? Mother, don't complicate things. I'm not ashamed of you, but of our poverty. Don't make me out to be a villain. People don't see you. They see your worn-out cheap sandals and penny dresses. There are plenty of such jerks. You can't prove anything to them. I just don't want to see those smirking faces. And why do you need to? To have them look at you like that? Fine. If you don't want me to, I won't go. Helen cut him off, starting to furiously whisk the liquid batter. At least I'll really save money, on the trip and everything else. Thanks, Mother. You're the best. I'll go swing by Andy's. I'll be back before lunch. Daniel quickly, awkwardly hugged his mother around the shoulders and ran off to his friends. Helen thought it would be better to cry out all her bitterness now, but she continued to quickly, silently whisk the batter, grease the baking sheet, and peel apples for the pie. There were no tears in her eyes, as if something deep inside had dried up. She put the pie in the oven, went out into the hallway, forced herself to look up and meet her reflection in the mirror. Not bad, not entirely lost. Nothing to feel sorry for herself about. Her son was just a child not long ago, and you couldn't expect him to act like an adult. And worn-out sandals weren't glued to her feet permanently. New ones would appear. Tomorrow was December 31st. She needed to make a good wish at midnight on New Year's Eve. Not just for Daniel, but for herself too, first and foremost. Squinting her eyes searchingly, she repeated, and for myself too. Yes, I really think we need to go visit your mother. Yes, I think it's better to meet before going to the registry office, not after. You know what my relationship with my parents is like, and it's time to get yours in order. If you think you've gotten involved with a nagging, bossy woman, you still have time to change your mind and solemnly break off our engagement. Julia was neither a nag nor bossy, but she often managed to fit both a joke and serious matters into the same sentence. It was never boring with her. She took many things in life lightly, but sometimes showed principle at the most unexpected moments for Daniel. When it became clear that their relationship was much more than a fleeting romance, she also wanted to know more about her boyfriend. She was interested in exactly what Daniel was used to avoiding in conversations with girls. The mocking, light-hearted Julia absolutely seriously respected family ties and was very close to her parents. And this didn't mean obedience at all. And why do you never talk about your childhood, about your parents? You didn't grow up in an incubator where they cloned software developers and testers, did you? Julia asked casually, but a probing slyness lurked in her eyes. Well, you almost guessed, Daniel chuckled, trying to hide his embarrassment. I studied in a boarding school. Boarding schools are often called incubators, like orphanages. But that's what they were definitely called back then. I don't know about now. I'm from a village, Julia. Wow, what a confession, Julia declared with a smirk. Do you consider this the most terrible fact of your biography? You won't get away with it now. This skeleton is already out of the closet, and it's only beautiful in books with soft, bright covers. Julia took his arm and slowed her pace, letting him know she was ready to listen attentively. If he had finally decided to get married by the age of 30, Let his fiancée know him as he really was, not a legend for casual acquaintances. As Daniel expected, what surprised Julia most was his story about his mother. 15 years without seeing your mother? Are you serious? What about money? You send her money constantly, don't you? I've been sending it since I started earning more than was needed for basic survival. She's refused a few times. She claims she has enough of her own. But that's because she's not used to allowing herself anything. She's more used to saving on herself. We call each other on holidays, and just because. I've never heard reproaches from her like, I miss you and you still don't come. I've invited her to visit me in Moscow so many times. She can never get herself together. There are always some silly reasons. And I'm also not ready to spend my vacation visiting the village. You just don't see the difference. You're not going to the village, but specifically to your mother, Julia reminded him. Oh, let's go together before the wedding. I think your mother and I will get along. That's exactly what I don't doubt, Daniel immediately confirmed, although he wasn't sure of anything. He hadn't spoken to his mother face to face in a long time, always just a few general phrases on the phone. He didn't know himself if his mother was still the way he remembered her, or if she was a completely different person now. He simply hadn't had time to think about it while he was building his own life. We still have a whole month to buy your mother a gift. What would make her happiest? Julia interrupted his unusual thoughts with an unexpected question and completely stumped Daniel. It seemed the last time he had given his mother something was a very long time ago, with his first salary, when he got a job as a night watchman in his first year of university. He remembered during a shift in the middle of the night her eternal worn-out imitation leather handbag, which she had already dyed twice. He suddenly felt ashamed and sorry. Before going home, he simply bought a new handbag at the shopping centre, not the most expensive one, on sale, but from a decent store, a leather one. He arrived for the visit with 2 sports bags full of various groceries and first pulled out a glossy bag with the gift from one of them. Here, this is for you. Wow, now I'll be the most fashionable girl in Kamishin, his mother announced cheerfully, immediately transferring her wallet, a pack of tissues, and a fabric cosmetic bag into the new handbag, slung the bag over her shoulder, and went into the hallway to admire herself. Daniel sat at the table, watching her and thinking quite condescendingly how little it took to make his mother happy. But then there was a quiet knock at the front door, and his mother responded in a melodious, girlish voice. "Come in." And in walked a bearded, red-haired man, looking like a Viking from some fantasy movie. He smiled quietly, stopping a couple of steps from the threshold, looking at his mother, and then suddenly noticed Daniel sitting at the table. And at that moment, his mother, casting quick glances at both of them in turn, said, "Oh, hi, Peter. Come in, sit down. Meet my son, Daniel. Daniel, Peter worked with Grandpa George on an expedition. He's a surveyor. Remember I told you that Grandpa's on vacation to my father, and I brought greetings from Grandpa as well, in the form of homemade honey," Peter clarified, entering the living room and pointing to the 3-liter jar with dark amber contents that Daniel had noticed on the old sideboard as soon as he arrived. "Nice to meet you, Daniel. My father also has a few beehives, just like your grandfather in his new place." He extended his wide, tanned hand to Daniel, and Daniel silently shook it, simply not wanting to appear uncivilized. "You came to visit your father on vacation, so talk to your father." It was almost 20 kilometers to Holme, a village on the highway. If you went to the district centre, it was easy to figure out that the red-haired surveyor was clearly not just passing through Kamishin, but had taken to visiting their house. The guest was not dense. He immediately understood that he was unwelcome at the moment. He didn't even sit down, walked back and forth along the window and said, "Be well, Helen. I'll be on my way. You and your son probably have a million important things to talk about. Bye." "Bye," his mother nodded with a slight smile, and her eyes laughed mysteriously, watching the guest's back. "What's this Peter doing here?" Daniel asked immediately, barely concealing his displeasure, as soon as the surveyor quietly closed the door behind him. "Did he want a full vacation with pampering and hot meals? He should have gone south then. This is a resort program." His mother came over to the table where Daniel was sitting and, whether joking or serious, tapped the tabletop with a small, tired fist. "Son, even though you're grown up and brought gifts, you should still choose your words with your mother. If you've noticed, I haven't interfered in your life since graduation, not in it at all." She felt it necessary to add, "By the way, Peter cooks perfectly well himself and doesn't need my watery cabbage soup." Daniel couldn't explain now why that old conversation suddenly came back to him. He and his mother hadn't guessed then that they wouldn't see each other for many years. While he was visiting his mother that last time, Peter didn't appear at their house again, and they never mentioned anything about it again. Daniel had no idea if she had a personal life, and it hadn't even occurred to him to ask. And now, when she was almost 50, it felt awkward to start asking. In the photos she sometimes sent him on his phone, his mother looked cheerful and serene. Was she good at creating the appearance of happiness, or was she really doing well? Daniel had never thought about this either. He was busy with himself, his career, and recently, his personal life. The upcoming trip made him think uncomfortable thoughts. He envied Julia. How could she be so happy, as if she were going on a seaside resort trip? And most importantly, anxiety crept into his mind. Would Julia look at him differently when she saw the living conditions he grew up in? For her, rural tourism was an ethnic village somewhere in Greece or Spain, and there the floors didn't rot and sink in dark hallways because of decayed boards, and silly bouquets from the 80s didn't hang on the walls. Sharp-eyed Julia would see all this and understand that if you scratched a successful software developer from an international company hard enough, you would find a kid underneath in cheap Chinese hand-me-down jackets with a crappy mobile phone, whom the class leaders called the son of a tramp. Well, what would be, would be. You couldn't run away from yourself forever and not see your mother for so many years. It was shameful. Getting angry at himself always worked wonders, and 15 minutes later he was already calling Julia and announcing that he had bought 2 train tickets. "There are no airports nearby. It's too far and inconvenient to travel from a plane. And the train stops at the station in the next village for a whole 2 minutes. If we're lucky, we'll manage to jump off. Practice, you have almost a month." His mother promised to meet them at the train station and categorically refused to take no for an answer. Indeed, she had stayed in Kamishin for too long and simply wanted to ride to the station and back on the bus, chat along the way with acquaintances she only met on the road. When Daniel wrote to her that he was coming to visit with his fiancée, he immediately received a reply, "Wow, I'm happy, waiting at Station Square." Julia said, "Now this I understand," and boasted about the gifts she had bought for his mother. It turned out she had bought a wind chime for the garden, a tablecloth for the table in the gazebo in the same style, and a set of coloured ceramic dishes to match. Heaven knows, Daniel had no idea how suitable these gifts were for his mother, but he admired them just in case. From himself, he would rather give money, as usual. At Sudakovo station, Daniel was the first to jump onto the dusty, packed earth. Nothing had changed. except that the wooden station building had been repainted from green to light blue, but everything else remained the same. No one had thought of paving the circular area in front of the building. Nothing had grown there for a long time anyway. The station ground was forever trampled by 100 years of dust. There wasn't a single tree under the windows. Only at the end of the area, near an old Neva, a lively dark-haired woman jumped out of it, waved her hand in greeting, and called out loudly, "Daniel, hi!" "It's Mother!" Daniel tugged Julia's sleeve, snapping out of his contemplation. "Let's go! She found someone to conveniently take us home." They quickly walked towards his mother, and his mother also approached them rapidly. With one hand she clasped the other, immediately extending it to Julia. "Helen, how was your journey, Julia?" "Thank you, we had a great trip with good neighbours in the compartment." "Well, that's wonderful." His mother smiled, and standing on tiptoe, hugged Daniel tightly and kissed him on both cheeks. Genuine joy shone in her eyes, and a sort of warm, honeyed scent emanated from her. She slightly pulled back after the greeting to get a good look at her son, and he gazed at her in surprise. She didn't look old and worn out. Almost the same as he remembered her, yet somehow different. With her figure preserved in those loose blue jeans, plaid shirt and cap, his mother could almost be mistaken for someone his own age, if you didn't look too closely, didn't scrutinize the network of fine lines on her forehead and at the corners of her eyes. You would never guess she was 50, bold eyes, young, quick. His mother preferred to voice her conclusions aloud. "How respectable you've become. None of our people will recognize you for sure, and if they do, they'll faint. If I hadn't seen your photos and videos, I wouldn't have recognized you as my son myself. Julia, is he at least not an arrogant bore?" "No, don't worry," Julia laughed. "Then load the luggage into the trunk, son," his mother suggested. "And who is our driver?" Daniel asked. "Our driver is me!" His mother grinned slyly, noticing his bewildered surprise. "Don't worry about your lives. I'll get you there perfectly fine. It's quiet on the roads out here in the sticks. I won't demonstrate any special skill. I drive carefully, like a real old hen. But it's safe, ladies and gentlemen." Without waiting for an answer, his mother settled behind the wheel. Julia quietly giggled, glancing at Daniel, and whispered to him, "What's ahead of you? Getting to know your mother all over again." His mother had no intention of maintaining an aura of mystery for long, and explained as soon as they got on the highway. "I won't pretend that I've become a businesswoman and managed to earn a car. My husband bought this. I didn't want to learn to drive at all. I was scared, but he persuaded me. I trembled and got flustered at first, but then it was fine. I got used to it." "Mother, why didn't you even tell me you got married?" Daniel ventured to ask, trying to hide his surprise and confusion. "Well, forgive me. I'm sorry, Daniel. My husband said I should tell you, but I just couldn't bring myself to. There wasn't a suitable occasion. It wouldn't affect your life anyway. If you ever need the inherited house in the sticks, that's definitely only your inheritance. I don't have any other children. I thought you'd find out when you came. Besides, you didn't approve of my choice right away. I remember that." "What choice?" Daniel no longer hid his confusion. "I married Peter," his mother explained softly. "A long time ago. Remember Peter, the surveyor who worked with Grandpa George and visited?" Both guests and hosts went to bed only after 3 a.m, deciding that otherwise they wouldn't get any sleep that day at all, and the young people had just come off the train. The night was clear, as if ordered, and they sat for a long time in the garden under the big stars, at the table covered with the new tablecloth, feasting, and drank a whole samovar of tea while talking. Peter fell asleep quickly. He'd been working until the evening after all. and Helen lay quietly, looking at the thin crescent moon in the window, remembering that day in all its funny and happy details. Imagine how many years she and her son hadn't really talked. But now that was over, and everything would be different. No, Daniel called her every month, asked if everything was okay, how her health was, her job, if she needed any more money for something urgent. Hearing everything is fine, he would say that he was doing well too. Sometimes he would mention changing jobs or getting a promotion, changing cars and buying an apartment, where he went on vacation. She would congratulate him. He would thank her. He invited her to visit too, probably out of politeness, not because he missed her. He had his own life there, in a completely different rhythm and by different rules. Many of his city acquaintances probably shouldn't be shown his village mother from the village post office, so as not to spoil the impression of himself. Maybe Daniel had even invented a different origin story and a different family for himself to fit into the world he desperately wanted to belong to. She didn't want to believe such thoughts, and Peter insisted that it wasn't so bad. He even grumbled, "How proud and stubborn you are. I would never have thought it when I got involved with you. You should talk to your son frankly. Tell him you miss him, that you're proud of how he achieved everything himself, despite a difficult childhood. At least tell him about us, otherwise it's some kind of ridiculous secret marriage, like in tabloid novels. You should have reassured him long ago that you don't count every penny, that life has improved, otherwise the boy sends you financial help and you stash it away, you schemer. Schemers stash it for themselves, but I'm saving it for him, like his personal banker. Now I'll solemnly present the contribution for the wedding trip," Helen retorted, winking. "Oh, stop being so silly. You've raised a normal, capable boy. He's achieved a lot himself and has probably buried his childhood fears long ago. And you still remember the old childhood hurt, how he was ashamed to see you at graduation. But you were already a grown girl then, and you got offended by a silly little boy." Usually Helen listened to Peter. He was sensible. He wouldn't blurt things out in anger. But when it came to her relationship with her son, she couldn't overcome herself. She even regretted at such moments that she had told Peter absolutely everything about herself. She wasn't offended by anyone. It was just that life itself had convinced her that there was no need to impose her love on anyone who didn't show that they needed her love. He managed perfectly well without her. She hadn't understood this with Michael, Daniel's father. She had followed him like a faithful shadow, living his problems and worries. But he had never once talked about a life together and children with her, and he hadn't promised anything. He talked about love only because all girls liked to hear it, and it was convenient for him that Helen was around while he lived in his father's house. She had made it all up herself. She only realized this when Daniel left to study and she was left alone. Then, as if by fate, she met Peter. Everything turned out completely differently. Peter had travelled half the country on his surveying expeditions, but he tried to visit his father in Holme every year. He didn't contemplate settling there until retirement. He suspected he would sink into gloomy thoughts and become completely despairing, when fewer places meant fewer reasons to be sad. He thought, perhaps, his son would change his plans when he decided to get married again. But 10 years had passed since Peter's first short-lived marriage, and there was no hint of a new attempt. He even divorced 3 years after the wedding. He went on an expedition to the north. His wife went to visit her mother and stayed there because she met a shoe store owner, and they and her mother decided that this was the best option. Her husband wasn't offended. He blamed only himself for the failure. He was captivated by bright beauty. He didn't pay attention to the fact that they were two different people. Gradually, he got used to the bachelor nomadic life. He didn't feel deprived at all, quite the opposite. There were always new people around, new interesting acquaintances. One day on an expedition, he met a drilling master, a man of solid age. They chatted and found out they were from the same area, 20 kilometers between their villages. They talked about fishing spots, mutual acquaintances, and in the mood, shared life stories. This fellow countryman, George, told him about his family, about his runaway wife, his foolish, selfish son, and his potential daughter-in-law with a real grandson. From that very evening of exchanging stories, they became friends, despite the age difference. George retired and, along with his civil partner, took up amateur beekeeping. And when Peter was going on vacation to his father in Holme again, his friend sent honey with him to his potential daughter-in-law, Helen, along with a thin envelope. Let this sweeten the girl's life. Helen met the guest in a friendly way. After just 10 minutes of talking to her, it felt like they had known each other forever. Peter subtly glanced around her living space. Everything spoke of poverty. Some people describe such homes as clean but poor. Many would say the same about the hostess's outfit, but there was no feeling of utter despair in Helen's house at all. On the contrary, a sense of coziness immediately took hold. Peter was surprised and thought about his new acquaintance all evening. No, the condition of the house didn't surprise him at all. He had seen much worse interiors on expeditions, at least 100 times dirtier. It was surprising to see such a beautiful woman living in this environment and not fading. The next evening he found himself near her house again and knocked on the door. "Peter, come in. Did you forget to deliver something?" "Everything's fine. I just thought maybe you need some help. With heavy lifting, I mean. Building or demolishing a shed, for example." "Did Uncle George ask you? It's cheeky to ask someone to spend their vacation on free labor." Helen smiled. "No, this is my own cheeky initiative. Think about what you might need." She suddenly became flustered. Peter understood. She wasn't used to having things done for her. More often she did things for others. A spark of distrustful suspicion lit up in her eyes. It wouldn't be easy with her, but he had already decided that the game was worth the candle. Helen was afraid for a long time to believe that this wasn't a trick or another self-deception. What could this man want from her? Only a few meetings, perhaps, to liven up his vacation. That wouldn't be bad for her. Many women really liked such short romances. She was afraid that it wouldn't be so easy and pleasant for her. She would accidentally get attached to the person, and then she would miss him foolishly and senselessly and wait for something. And with Peter, that's exactly what would happen. He was too much to her liking. It was better not to disrupt the usual course of life. "You're a coward, Helen," Nancy taunted, even swore. "I would never have thought before that you were such a coward and had such a nasty opinion of yourself. It's obvious to the naked eye that he's a decent man and takes you seriously. Listen to something interesting I found out. One of the loggers who always eats at our place goes fishing with your Peter's father. They went recently. His father boasted that Peter is thinking of staying and seriously expanding the apiary, starting a legal honey business. He saved up money up north while living a nomadic gypsy life, and now he's decided to settle down. There you go." "I'm convinced. And what does that have to do with me?" Helen defended herself. "Don't play dumb. You understand perfectly well," an angry Nancy hissed like a whistling kettle. "Daniel didn't like him," Helen offered her last argument. "Daniel isn't going to live with him," Nancy replied even more severely. "I'll tell you honestly, for Daniel to understand anything, time just needs to pass. He's still young. Let him grow up, get his own bruises first. Then you'll speak the same language again. But now listen to yourself, your intuition. Just take a risk, Nellie. That's what I'm telling you." Helen was no longer able to argue with her. She also noticed one thing. The more she resisted change, the more she looked for reasons to refuse, the more reasons Peter gave her to believe him. Nancy was their modest witness at her and Peter's wedding. Who else? "And then you and your husband built up this amazing apiary together?" Julia asked. "Uh-huh," Helen chuckled cheerfully, "but that's only in movies where you're crying in an icy bus, and in the next shot you're sitting in a Mercedes looking like a magazine cover. We struggled so much with this apiary idea. We remember it ourselves, laugh, and can't understand why we didn't give up. I won't even talk about the bees themselves and the intricacies of handling them. You're probably not interested in that. How many papers you need for legal honey sales? That's where it's dark for beginners. Product analyses, veterinary certificate, apiary sanitary passport." I was ready to panic, but Peter is so balanced, no storms could faze him. "It took us a very long time to recoup the costs, but now our brand is well known in several districts of the region. It's time to expand our horizons. We have more experience now. It should go easier. I'm sure we'll be able to carry out our plans with my husband." "You are an invincible woman," Julia said, taking advantage of a pause in her future mother-in-law's story. "Now I know for sure where Daniel inherited his character from." "Oh, Julia," Helen laughed, "Daniel has achieved so much. At his age I was counting pennies. I couldn't even provide for him properly, so he wouldn't feel worse than other kids. I would have sat at the post office for peanuts my whole life if I hadn't been so lucky with my husband. So your flattery is misplaced. I understand everything about myself." "I wasn't trying to flatter you," Julia objected. "You're wrong to think that character is only shown in a career. I'm not even 30 yet. I see so many people of their age who are bitter towards the world, disillusioned with everything. They live in decent conditions. Their parents did everything so they wouldn't lack anything while they were getting an education, starting to work. They don't have children or don't have to raise them alone. Many of them probably couldn't have endured what you did with dignity and not become bitter. It made me uncomfortable when I realized how cruel Daniel actually was to you, and you greeted him so warmly. For 15 years, just sending his mother some kind of monetary ransom instead of attention and formally calling on holidays. I had a lot I wanted to say. I just didn't want to spoil your celebration, since you were happy to see him anyway." "Can I ask you something?" Helen interrupted. "Don't, Julia. It's hard enough for him right now. I see he's already thought it over himself. We'll build a real relationship. I'm also to blame, as you see. I didn't even tell him about my marriage for many years, and I did take the money, even though I didn't need it anymore. By the way, before the men come back from the apiary, here it is. Take this envelope for yourself. It will come in handy for the wedding." "Mother-in-law refusing?" "Let's seal our friendship with a woman's secret,"